Hey everybody, a much requested video is what are the best top laners of the current patch? What are the top 10 top laners of current patch? Well, with the meta sort of, I'm not going to say stabilizing, but with the item buffs for top lane out, with many of the top laner buffs out, I think this is probably one of the safest positions to actually make a video like this, because I don't think that these champions will change very much in recent time. I think that these champions will stay pretty stable. Some might get better, some might get worse, but I think overall, for like a video that might last like 2 or 3 months of what are the best top laners, this video will actually be in a good position to make it. So what are the top 10 top laners? That's also a question that's somewhat difficult to answer. One of the problems is who's good at the low ranks, who's good at the mid ranks, who's good at the high ranks tends to differ a lot. In addition, as you reach Challenger, and especially as you reach the higher end Challengers, people get extremely sweaty, and lane prio in the early game becomes more and more important. Who's the best in the game can change significantly. So I opted to make this list for the high rank, but not the super sweaty top 10 Challenger sort of area. Because right now, the way the game is played, a lot of champions that are good tend to be the best champions basically only in the top 10 Challenger or top 100 Challenger, but effectively like nowhere else, right? So like, for example, the best overall champion in the game right now might be Rumble for top lane, but Rumble's not really good anywhere other than extremely high Challenger. I think he's extraordinarily overpowered, and I think his laning phase is massively over the top, and I do think he needs to be nerfed. But to list Rumble as a top 10 top laner when he doesn't really do that good outside of the super high ranks doesn't seem to be that relevant to the grand majority of people who are going to be watching this video. And by that, I mean even grandmasters who watch this video, they'll probably look at Rumble and they'll say, yeah, he's really good. He's probably overpowered even, but the top 10? Really? And so what I'm aiming for here is overall the top 10 top laners based on the meta we're in, based on where I think we're going to be in like a week, 2 weeks from now, especially after some of the coming nerfs and stuff like that. And yeah, basically I want this to just be an overall who's good for the most people, but also, you know, bearing in mind that you want to actually have these champions be good for good players, right? So I don't think anyone would actually disagree with me that any of these champions are good. I just think that some people maybe at the super high rank might disagree with who's actually, you know, the top 10 best. There's a long-winded way of saying this is a very difficult list to make, and I'm sure many people will disagree with me, and I'm kind of trying to do my best here. Okay. So that said, if you want to listen, you can listen. If you want to follow along, you can follow along. What I'm going to do to try to make this more interesting is when I put a champion in, I'm going to go over briefly their item build, and I'm going to go over briefly their rune build if I can. Some of them are a bit sketchy, and some of them I won't go over because it's kind of in flux, and you're going to have to go you probably have to go, you know, find an updated list because some of these champions haven't exactly figured out their items with some of the item changes. And, you know, I can look it up and I can do my best, but realistically, I wouldn't feel too confident for some of these champions saying, you know, what their best item build is. So, let's do a little edited blah, blah, blah. Once again, with all these videos, you can put me on your second monitor. You can keep me on your main monitor. You can listen along. You can do other stuff. That's fine. I'm going to be talking throughout this entire video. I'll try to keep you guys, you know, I like saying this, visually stimulated. You can be visually stimulated while watching this. So, number 10 at the turn. Who's the 10th best top laner? I would say Darius. Some people might disagree with me on this, but I think Darius overall has all his items continue to get buffed. Even though he himself hasn't gotten buffed, all his items continue to get buffed. Stridebreaker notably gave him a bit tankier of a rush. He obviously struggles. The higher rank you go, he struggles a bit more, but he stays fairly consistent and he stays fairly picked even into the highest ranks. Overall, I would say there's basically no issue. If you play Darius, you can play anywhere from bronze to challenger, and you might struggle a little bit as you reach Challenger, but you'll still be better off than most other champions. For the grand majority of players, Darius will be a top 10 pick. I'm putting him in here at the 10th slot because I do think he's a little bit weaker into some champions, but particularly because he is a good matchup into Renekton. This makes him, because so many people are first picking Renekton now, this makes Darius he's just a good pick right now. So for those of you who want to try Darius, the general build for Darius would be something like this. You got your Conquer, your Triumph, your Last Stand, and your Unflinching. Those I would probably call your core runes. You go attack speed, so you can proc up your bleed more. Second Wind or Bone Plating depends. Legend Tenacity or Alacrity depends. Alacrity tends to do better a bit, because playing more for the early game tends to do better, but if you're fighting CC spam, you go Tenacity. Darius's core build, I'm going to call it his core build, is he's got Stride Breaker, which he goes the vast majority of the time. Dead Man's Plate, which once again, he tends to do the vast majority of the time, and his Sterix Gauge. Sometimes Distance, depending on what he needs. I would say this is like his core build: Stride Breaker, Dead Man's, Sterix Gauge. If you're fighting lots of magic damage, you can swap Dead Man's for Force of Nature, but Force of Nature is just not really that amazing of an item right now. It's like fine, but like it's kind of like a desperation move. In addition to that, you of course got your Hull Breaker, which you can slot in second if you're snowballing and you just want to eke out a win in the laning phase. I would say this is overall the best. I would try to avoid Force of Nature if you can. Realistic, if you're fighting magic damage, I would just go Merc Treads, and then I would just do Stride Breaker into Sterix, and yeah. So I'm not going to go too much more in depth into it than that, because obviously we wouldn't have time to go too much into it than that. So basically, you're just running Darius for the typical Stride Breaker build. Up next, so who's 9? The 9th best top laner. Oh, and for the record, I wanna just emphasize on Darius here real quick. I looked into his data a lot actually because I was curious. Darius basically goes even or winning in practically every matchup, even into the high ranks. Champions he gets outscaled by, he beats pretty hard in the laning phase. Champions who outscale him, he can easily kill. He can outscale some champions just by being tankier into laning phases, or sorry, into team fights from the laning phase. The Stride Breaker got more HP, the Sterix Gauge got more HP, cost went down, his items got better. Overall, Darius tends to do 50 to 51% win rate in practically every matchup. He does have some matchups he obviously excels in, and he does have some matchups he does quite poorly in, namely Quinn. I would highly, if you're going to play Darius, some people ban Vayne. Quinn seems to be the bigger issue, but the thing is, very few people actually play Quinn into Darius. It seems to be very rare that anyone actually counterpicks Darius. That seems to be one of the things. Now, if Darius does get counterpicked, it's really bad. You're going to have a bad time. But very rarely, if you look up in his data, very rarely does he ever actually get counterpicked. Most people seem to play safer champions into him, for sure. But overall, it's very rare that people actually bust out the Queen or the Vayne to fight him. Compared to other champions, say Kosante, who gets counterpicked by Gwen so much that it's insane. Darius's matchup, I think Quinn is his 26th highest matchup. So 25 champions get picked into Darius before Quinn, which is to say, very rarely does he actually get counterpicked. Okay, but again, it does suck when you do. Okay, next up is number 9. Okay, so for number 9, we have Malphite. Now, why Malphite? I would never recommend first picking Malphite. Let's be blunt. I would, if you're first picking Malphite, you are really, really, really dumb. Okay, never first pick Malphite. But as a counter pick, Malphite is extraordinarily powerful. He single-handedly keeps Jace from being pickable, realistically speaking. It sounds really dumb, but basically the fact that anyone who plays Jace instantly gets smacked by Malphite effectively keeps Jace from being a first pickable champion in top lane, because especially if your opponents know how to play more than just Malphite, if you pick Jace, you ban Malphite, then they just instantly swap over to one of Jace's other counter picks. And Malphite stomps on Jace and Quinn and Vayne and these champions so hard that it basically stops them from ever getting first pick to a reasonable degree, because the second anyone goes Quinn, you're like Malphite, and that's the end of that. In addition to that, he plays pretty well into most matchups, even with some champions getting way more magic damage, like Jack's got more magic damage, Aatrox's got more magic damage, Renekton's ultimate got giga buffed, and now he does a lot of magic damage. Even with that, Malphite scales pretty decently with his Grasp and Undying build, and he can just really lay the hurt onto a lot of people. He's just extremely easy to play and extremely competent, and I would say he's probably the 9th overall. I'm going to put it like this. I would say he's overall the 9th best top laner, just due to his ability to counterpick extremely well. If you want to play Malphite, obviously you have two builds. You've got the I go late game build, where you just do this, and you probably do something like this, and you just go late game. You just rely on the Grasp and Undying poke, you rely on getting the mana flow ban, the transcendence, the conditioning, the overgrowth. You survive through the laning phase, and then you become a very tanky, hard to kill monster. The Grasp and Undying means you can trade back against other champions pretty well, and additionally you can trade against champions pretty well. This is actually what you're supposed to do. I forgot. You know, that's my thing. Well, it depends on a lot of different things. A lot of people do like going Shield Bash, and I think Shield Bash is overall the more popular thing. So I'll say Shield Bash, conditioning, and overgrowth, because the Shield Bash and the Grasp and Undying get your W's good poke, and then these runes are just pretty good on their own. Now, some people will do this. It depends on your matchup. Do you need to play safe? The attack speed, I would actually say overall just better, because OSW works. That's generally speaking, this is your I'm fighting a melee champion build. Now, if you're fighting a ranged champion, you're going to do something like this. And this tends to be more so your build. You're going to go Arcane Comet, double AP, second wind. This build tends to not... it's with the overgrowth. Sorry, I have to like remember these off the top of my head, because, yeah. This build is if you're fighting Jace, Gnar, stuff like that. Arcane Comet for poke, Scorch for poke, second wind to survive poke, double AP rune to poke harder, and then you've just got overgrowth, so you're a little bit tankier. This build is also pretty dang good. Basically invalidates all ranged champions in the game. For items, I'm going to assume that you're not an idiot and you counterpicked with Malphite. If you first picked him and you got counterpicked by Silas or something, you're doomed. I can't help you. Iceborne Gauntlet, though. Extremely powerful item, allows you to perma-soak, does good damage. Sunfire, why? Because, well, it's Sunfire, it's just really good. Then, of course, we got your Thornmail. Last up, this is basically the anti-AP item that everyone goes, is Abyssal. So, basically, these are your 3 core items, but you've got Abyssal here if you need a little bit of magic resist. Other than that, you just do normal tank items. So, that's generally what you're going to do with Malphite. Overall, just a very strong counter pick. Basically, it's not going to leave the meta. I don't think he's going to leave the meta for quite some time. Not really. So, who's the number 8? Number 8. Who's the 8th best top laner? We have... I am blind, is what I am. There we go. So, there's a lot of pictures here. Riven! Okay. So, I can actually explain what happened with Riven, okay? Riven can't really use the new Gore Drinker, and she also can't really use Sterak's, and she definitely can't use Spirit-Ocean, and that kind of puts her in a really bad position, because Spirit-Ocean's a pretty good item right now. She can't use it. Sterak's Gauge is a pretty good item right now. She can't use it. Gore Drinker is, and I'm sure many of you are shocked to hear this, Gore Drinker is actually a really good item right now. So the problem is Riven can't really use any of those. She's stuck into doing a lethality Hydra build, and that it's like good, but there's definitely been power creep. There's definitely been like power creep for the rest of the game. Now maybe she could use Spirit-Ocean, like I'll give you that, but at very least she can't really do the Gore Drinker, she can't really do the Sterak's, and those 2 items are pretty hot right now for a lot of different champions. Because she can't do Gore Drinker, she can't do Sterak's, that means that she tends to team fight weaker than the champions who can. In addition, Renekton's pretty good right now. she has to obviously ban Renekton, but having to ban Renekton is not really that good of a feeling. Because realistically speaking, Renekton's not like so overbearing, in my opinion, that like wasting a ban on him feels that good. But Riven obviously would have to. Other than that, Riven's perfectly fine. There's obviously like there's been power creep in items, and she's like fallen off a little bit due to the power creep in items. But other than that, she's a perfectly fine champion. If you know how to play Riven, she's still basically free LP, but basically being the modifier here. Gore Drinker Rush getting more popular and being more powerful on different champions means that champions that Riven could try to one-shot, like Aatrox, can now do a tankier build and can try to resist her one-shotting. It also means that Renekton went from, oh yeah, maybe she can try to fight him, to, yeah, there's, like maybe, but realistically, ugh, you know, there's also been some buffs to other champions that she used to be able to curb stomp, namely Jax and Yone, who she definitely had good matchups into. She still got like decent matchups into them, but it's not as completely one-sided as it used to be. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. For build, I had to actually look this up, by the way. For builds for Riven, it's a pretty typical Riven build. You're going to go Nimbus Cloak, and you're going to go Transcendence, double damage, and armor. Although some Riven players go with the ability haste rune, it tends to not really be that good. Now, Alacrity or Tenacity, Tenacity tends to overperform Alacrity much better. Even if your opponents have not that much CC, mitigating even not that much CC tends to be better than attacking slightly more on Riven, because you only really need to attack like twice on her, and she gets pretty good attack speed per level anyway. So for example, on Aatrox, Aatrox's low attack speed per level, so that 18% matters more to him. On Riven, I think at level 18 she's got like 54% bonus attack speed, so it's not really that impactful to get 18%. Everybody get that? Okay. So this would probably be your default build as Riven. You got that Nimbus Cloak, that Transcendence, that Conqueror. That's your general build. For items, Riven, and this is why, you know, I'm not saying she's bad. She's definitely still top 10. So like any champion listed here is top 10, meaning they're quite good, right? The problem with Riven is her best build right now tends to be Ravenous Hydra into Eclipse, which is a little bit outdated. It's not a bad build, but it just starts to feel a little bit outdated. Compared to other builds, compared to what other champions can do, and because of that, you know, again, I would say that Riven used to be a top 3 champion, but it's just like the recent item changes have like they've given more champions the ability to do stuff, and definitely they've been able to now actually compete with Riven in, I'm not gonna say a fair way, but they definitely can manage to compete with her more. So our default build is just gonna be Ravenous Hydra, Eclipse, Descent. Some people are experimenting with Spirit-Sojin. I'm not going to say that because I'm not a Riven player and I don't know anything about Spirit-Sojin. Seems like it's getting decently popular, but I can't say really. The Ravenous Hydra Rush gives you good healing, ability haste, lots of damage. The Eclipse gives you that lethality, that armor pen. The damage, the ability haste, pretty good on that one. That's going to overall be your Riven build. Not much more to say than that. Oh, and just remember, do ban Renekton. Number, what are we up to? 7. I'm gonna say Camille. Okay, so I'm blind and can't find her. There we go. Camille is quite good right now. I would say once again, much like Riven, Camille was like a top 3 top laner for a few patches. But the buffs to other top laners, and definitely the buff to other top laner items, have pushed her down a little bit. Once again, Gore Drinker has made Aatrox and Renekton significantly better. Steric's Gauge is significantly better. She can use Steric's Gauge because she tries to use Grass Plan Dying. So it's not like she can't use Steric's Gauge. It's just like, it's not like her best ideal item. Where Steric's Gauge is absolutely amazing on Renekton because he runs into the middle of the team and he pops his ult. And it's really good on Aatrox because once again he can stay alive and then use the Steric's Gauge Giga Shield to continue to lifesteal. On Camille, not so much. I should also mention Riven has lower base damage than most other bruisers, so the Steric's gauge damage tends to give her way less. Camille recently did get her base damage buffed. It's still not on the level of like Darius and Aatrox and those sorts of champions, but I would say overall it's still good. It's not as bad as Riven, her base damage now. So yeah. Divine Thunder has been nerfed a lot. Her items are fine. She's still fine. She's still like really good. Her team fight. So the problem is, at least for Camille, with Gordrinker and Steric's Gauge, we've got a lot of other champions that can now team fight pretty good. Camille, one of Camille's advantages is most bruisers just kind of sucked at team fighting, and so the thing was, Camille's weaker team fighting wasn't really that big a deal because most other bruisers also sucked at team fighting. So it was like, well, I suck, we all suck, right? But now with the Steric's Gauge and the Gordrinker, the Spirit potentially, Camille is just like, her lack of team fighting power is more noticeable now. But I will say that I don't. Once again, if you're in this list, if I'm putting you here at all, you're already a top tier champion. Okay. Just overall, yeah. Number, what up to? 5. Is this 5? No, 6. Number 6. I'm gonna put Aatrox. Some people are probably mad at me for not listing Aatrox higher, but I think that this is a fair ranking for him. I think he's a very consistent pick right now. In the past, if he played into a bad matchup, he was hopeless because he couldn't really scale, and because he couldn't really scale, that meant if he lost the laning phase, the game became significantly harder for him. He can scale better now, and particularly with the Gordrinker and the Steric's Gauge, which I keep mentioning. Take a shot every time I say Gordrinker and Steric's Gauge. With those two items, he can team fight way better now. He can frontline way better now. And overall, he tends to just be very capable at doing things that in the past he couldn't do. His downsides, however, is many of the top 10 picks in the game right now can beat him. In fact, they beat him pretty easily. Fiora is good into him. Yone is good into him. Camille is good into him. Even Riven is still good into him. Not as good as she used to be, but still good into him. And so because of that, he tends to struggle. Additionally, Kosante players have found how to play against Aatrox a little bit better as well. And Aatrox can struggle into the Kosante matchup. So the problem with Aatrox is he's extraordinarily powerful right now, but the meta is just full of anti-Aatrox picks. And so with that in mind, it's hard to like list him as being within the top 5 if he's being countered by so many of these champions. So yeah. What are we gonna build on Aatrox? Let's do runes first. Aatrox runes are pretty simple. In fact, I have them right here. You're doing Conquer, Tenacity. I mean, obviously you're doing Conquer, Triumph, Tenacity, Last Stand, Second Wind, Revitalize, Double Damage, Armor. You can also go Bone Plating, but the thing is, this is one thing I've noticed pretty much consistently right now. If you can use Bone Plating or Second Wind, that Second Wind will outperform Bone Plating, because Second Wind, Door, and Shield is quite a good way to survive the laning phase against most champions who don't just try to go for the all-in one-shot. Against basically every champion, Second Wind actually outperforms Bone Plating. Now, Bone Plating is better into some champions, like let's say Renekton, but yeah. This is going to be an overall build, pretty typical build for bruisers at this point. For items, obviously we're going to go ahead and we're going to recommend that Gordrinker. Now, for second item, I think there's this Cyrilda's route, and then there's the Black Cleaver route. So one of these for your second item, Cyrilda's or Black Cleaver. Now you can finish off your build with the other one. So you could do like Gordrinker to Cyrilda's and a Black Cleaver. That'll do a lot of damage, but it's not really that needed anymore. And then of course you got your Steric's Gauge and your Death Stance. Overall, this is your pretty consistent build. You're good at team fighting, you're good at everything. You can slot in other things like Hullbreaker and whatever you need. Like if you need to do it, you can change up your build. But you know, I'm not gonna really spend that much time in this video on each individual champion saying like, here's 7 different builds you can do on this champion, because that would take a very long time to do and wouldn't really be contributing much. So Aatrox, good solid pick, very powerful, but just has a lot of counter picks to him. So it's like I'm hesitant to put him in the top 5 if he has so many champions who do very good into him right now. Who's number 5 then? Who's actually in the top 5? Number 5. Who is number 5? Well, we're gonna go with Jax. I think Jax obviously scales better than Aatrox still. Not as much as he used to. Aatrox is definitely much stronger late game than he used to be. And into the late game, Aatrox can actually... Definitely into the mid game, Aatrox can actually start taking that fight. I think at 1 item, Jax is stronger. At 2 items, Aatrox might pull ahead, depending on what item he goes with. 3 to 4 items, Jax probably starts pulling it back. And then definitely at 4, he pulls it back. At either rate, what I'm saying is that... Jax does outscale Aatrox, not that hard. The Counter-Strike nerf did hurt Jax pretty bad, is one of the problems. The Counter-Strike nerf made his good matchups less good. It didn't really affect his bad matchups that much, let's say that, because his bad matchups he can't really go in that much anyway, but his good matchups, things like Yone, those champions now have way more time and opportunity to fight him between Counter-Strikes. So Yone, Camille, Aurelia, those champions can find way more time to hit him, which means that he's doing worse into his good matchups. I would say overall, obviously, I would put him at number 5. So he's doing quite well for himself, in my opinion. He's still doing quite well for himself. It's just he's less capable of taking over the game. And definitely into the later game, obviously the Counter-Strike is that longer cooldown that impacts his ability to team fight. His Counter-Strike, Hourglass Counter-Strike combo has a slightly wider opening on it now, which, you know, makes him much weaker than he used to be. Other than that, Jax is a very good champion, very powerful. Divine Sunderer Jax can be quite the burden on most champions to fight, because it's just such a powerful combo. It's such a powerful build. Hourglass is so much synergy on him. And the Spirososian that he's been going second, it gives him so much ability haste that he can just leap strike into a leap strike into a leap strike while spamming W's like a madman. So for runes, we have a pretty typical Jax build. You got that lethal tempo, that alacrity, triumph, last stand, magical footwear, biscuits, and in attack speed. Some people are doing cosmic insight and biscuit delivery. I don't know if this is a good idea, but it's something that's been kind of, I'm gonna say it's like been picking up traction. More people have been trying it. It's definitely something that like when I look into it, I think it's actually more popular now to go cosmic insight than magical footwear. So I guess if it's more popular, I'll recommend it. So definitely cosmic insight and biscuit. So that gets you more flashes, that gets you more teleports, that helps you a lot more throughout the game. Legend Alacrity tends to be picked more than Legend Tenacity, but obviously if you need Legend Tenacity, then you just have to go Legend Tenacity. Coup de Grace is just not as good as Last Stand at all, so don't even consider it. And this is your Jax build, generally speaking, and again, you can go Legend Tenacity if you need to. For items, it's pretty simple what we do right now. I think this is pretty much a solved champion, so to speak. The build is pretty consistent. You're gonna go Divine Sunderer into Spirososian into Hourglass. The Divine Sunderer gives you those W spam hits that heal you and do good damage. The Spirososian gives you a shitload of ability haste and that huge stack of health and some pretty good damage on it. Hourglass, Jax has pretty good AP ratios now. So if you Hourglass, that means you can Counter-Strike into an Hourglass into another Counter-Strike. That makes Jax's team fighting quite difficult for many champions to deal with. So as a core build, this is pretty much solved, in my opinion. Very rarely do you go away from this. This is just basically always going to be your default build. There's not much you can do with Jax other than to go with these 3 items. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's probably a good thing that a champion is a good, consistent item build, right? And so yeah, I mean, there's not that much to talk about for Jax here. Obviously, Jax was completely dominant in the meta for a very long time. So it's good that he's not completely dominant, but I do think Jax is quite good right now. I'll just say that. I do think he's quite good. In fact, I'm probably underrating him by a little, and maybe I should swap him with one of the higher champions. I probably should, but the higher champions I have higher for a reason. Up next, at number 4. 4. If I had an editor, they could add a 4. 4. Who's the 4th best top laner in the game? So this one's probably going to annoy a few people, because some people are in denial over this and don't like admitting it. But who is the 4th best top laner? I'm buying time because I can't find them, because I don't think they're actually listed here. I don't think they're actually listed here. They are not. Oh boy, this is awkward. It's K'Sante, but I'm gonna use Yumi's gonna be a placeholder for K'Sante because he's not actually listed here. Okay, okay. K'Sante. People really don't like hearing that K'Sante is still good. Okay, let's say it out loud. Let's say the thing that many of you are going to shriek and scream and refuse to accept in your heart. K'Sante is one of the hardest champions to play in the game, and in order to do well at him, you very much need to know the champion, to know his kit, and you need to know his limitations, and you need to know your damage very precisely. K'Sante, here's the thing. Some people might say, well, K'Sante does really bad at the low ranks because XYZ. The thing is, K'Sante is a decently scaling pick, right? So there's no excuse for the low ranks to not be able to play him. He's just too complicated. He's a very complicated champion, and you need to be able to play him quite well. Now, as you get up the ranks, more and more people can play him and don't screw him up, so his win rate goes up. But the thing is, even the best K'Sante players can screw him up. Even the best K'Sante players can do things wrong with him. And he just is very, very good despite the low win rate. If they brought K'Sante to a 50% win rate, he would be the most broken champion in the game and basically be an auto win. So it's not a good thing if he was at 50% win rate. He's currently 45% win rate for most ranks until you reach the high ranks. Does that mean he's bad? No. In fact, I would say he's like the 4th best top laner. K'Sante is just really good. He does need to ban Gwen. He does have bad matchups. He does struggle quite frequently. But with that said, even with those bad matchups, and the biggest problem K'Sante has is those bad matchups. His bad matchups tend to be so bad that it can really mess with him how bad his bad matchups are, right? But the thing is, he beats up Aatrox, who's really popular right now. The Renekton matchup is pretty bad for him. I will admit the Renekton matchup is pretty bad. I've played that from the Renekton side, and I've played that from the K'Sante side. On the Renekton side, Renekton's Q healing and his Gore Drinker just kind of put him outside of K'Sante's kill range. K'Sante generally works at whittling you away into an ultimate, but Renekton doesn't really lose health because of his Q spam, because of his Gore Drinker. K'Sante can actually struggle just to get his health to go down. And then if K'Sante ults, Renekton will just rage W and, drop him from full HP. Well, the ultimate HP, which is half HP, he'll, you know what I'm trying to say here, right? So he really struggles. He really struggles. K'Sante really struggles with that Renekton matchup. But overall, I would still say, in my heart, I feel like he's just such a good champion right now. It's very hard to put K'Sante not in a high position. I do play him, so this isn't me being salty. I'm not saying, oh, I lost a matchup to K'Sante. He's really overpowered. Like, I play him, and you guys have seen me play him, and every time I play him, my thoughts are, dang, this guy is just good. Like, if you know what you're doing, he's just good. If you know to jump to teammates, to knock, use your W to knock people away, use your W to immune CC. You can use your knockups to get kills on a flash play. Your ulting through the right terrain can completely annihilate people, escape ganks. He just has so many things he can do. He's just so powerful. So what are Kosante's best runes? Well, your best runes as Kosante are probably going to be something like this. Maybe not this in its entirety, so to speak, but this is the general idea of what you want to do. Cosmic Insight has actually been falling out of favor on Kosante, but I think it's still the more popular one. I think Magical Footwear is actually slightly outperforming it lately. That's just my opinion. With Kosante moving back to Flash from Ghost, Cosmic Insight has lost some of its luster, so to speak. I should do it with these runes. So, you know, yeah, I would say this is going to be your general build. Now, obviously, this is the more popular build, so maybe you should just do this. But I think Magical Footwear is starting to creep up, is more popular. But I definitely think Cosmic Insight, Cosmic Insight's not bad. It's just Magical Footwear might be a little bit better. Approach Velocity is good in the right situation. I definitely think that one. In the right situation, it can be good, but people tend to overvalue it, so to speak. People just go like, oh, I'm fighting anyone. I better go approach velocity so I can run after them. But the thing is, like with Iceborne Gauntlet, you're always going to be in range anyway. Like you need to go approach velocity in champions who can actually kite out of approach velocity. You know, like being in extra melee does you no good. Like now I'm in melee, but now I'm in extra melee due to approach velocity. Like it doesn't do any good. Second Wind really lends itself towards his trading pattern. The way Kosante trades in lane, Second Wind just is really, really good. Because he goes for the Q auto, his opponent hits him back, he backs off. Q auto, his opponent hits him, he backs off. So Second Wind just, because of how he trades and because of how he plays, Second Wind tends to do very good. Conditioning has kind of completely fallen off at this point. It's not doing good. Yeah. Basically, it's just conditioning's just not really doing that good anymore. It takes too long to get going, and even though it has crazy synergy with his kit, trying to win the laning phase with Kosante is very important. So I'd say overall, this is going to be your build on Kosante. You can go magic resist if you need to, but overall, you're looking for grasp trades with short Second Wind, and that's your general play style, and that's exactly what you need to do. For items, once again, I think much like Jack's, Kosante's items are kind of solved. Like, his best items are his best items, and it's kind of like a solved build. So, you're going to go with the Iceborne Gauntlet because it is blatantly his best item. Like, it's not even close. Iceborne Gauntlet is perfect synergy with this kit. Removes a shitload of his counterplay. Now, when you guys hear that, you probably think it removes his counterplay. That's bad for him. I don't care. We're not talking about what's healthy for the game. We're just talking about what's good for Kosante. Iceborne Gauntlet is good for Kosante. It's very difficult to dodge his abilities after you get it. It allows you to perma-chase. It is extraordinarily powerful. Sunfire allows him to do more damage, obviously. It gives him wave clear, so he can clear those waves, get to more fights, spend less time doing stuff. And basically, it's just his best secondary item. For third, once again, not as solved as the other two, but basically solved, is Gargoyle Stoneplate. Gargoyle Stoneplate is basically his best third option, because after you ult, you can pop Gargoyle Stoneplate and not get burst down. Before you ult, it just gives you so much armor and magic resist that your Q cooldown goes down to the minimum. It also gives you that stacking armor and magic resist that's just very, very powerful. Gargoyle Stoneplate, so basically Iceborne, Sunfire, Gargoyle, there's your magic resist, there's your armor, there's your HP. Quite an effective build, basically solved. There's very little reason to go outside of this build. Now, you do have Thornmail. Thornmail is going to be a possible item you could go. Into the right matchups, it's quite good. If you're fighting the right champion, like maybe Fiora, Thornmail can be quite good. But even then, you probably just want to sit on a Bramble Vest, then get these 3 items done. Now, you can get that Thornmail 4th, and that's what most people do. and then it's quite good. So, I mean, you're going to want all 4 of these items, but your first 3 are probably going to be these. And that's what you're going to do for Kosante the majority of the time, and it's very effective. You're very tanky, you're very damaging. Please go into the comments and post the stupid Kosante copy pasta. I never get enough of hearing it. It makes my day better. Number 3. Who is the 3rd best top laner, in my opinion? Well, it's definitely gonna be Renekton. Yeah, not much more to say than that. Of champions that I don't think are overpowered, Renekton is probably the best. He's extremely consistent. He has very little weaknesses. He scales pretty decently now. Not amazingly, but he scales pretty decently. I don't hate having a late game Renekton anymore. He can still bully the lane. His Q spam can be tedious for people to deal with. He does have bad matchups. One thing a lot of people don't know is Renekton is the largest hitbox in the game. So some champions like Darius or Aatrox can have a very easy time hitting them with their edges. It also makes him it makes it quite difficult for him to dodge abilities. Now, it doesn't affect matchups like Camille. That doesn't affect matchups like Riven. But again, matchups like Aatrox and matchups like Darius can become quite difficult for Renekton because there's very little chance that he can actually dodge his opponents. Yeah. Not much more to say about Renekton. He's just a very consistent first pick. He can play into range very easily. He can play into melee very easily. Very little weak about this champion. Very little weak. Basically, nothing about this champion is weak. Yeah. I mean, there's not much to talk about because I think we all know it. Renekton is just very, very consistent and very safe as a first pick. If you are first pick and you're trying to win, you will pick Renekton. I think that's just consistently true right now, and I think everybody's queued on to that because once you pass Diamond, it's like once you get to D2+, Renekton becomes the highest pick champion, and he stays that way all the way into Challenger. There's no downside to Renekton. I don't know how many times I need to say that. There's no downside to Renekton. So runes for Renekton are pretty consistent. I think most people agree with that. So you're gonna go with the Conqueror, Alacrity, double damage, armor. Now you don't always need to go with Alacrity, but it is quite good on him. It helps him bully the landing phase more. It helps him generate more rage. Go Legend Tenacity if you need to go Legend Tenacity. For runes over here, the most popular build is well, the most popular is Bone Plating Unflinching. I actually think Second Wind Unflinching is better because his trading pattern just works better with Second Wind. He tends to go in for lots of pokes, then an all-in, like short trades. Short trades, Bone Plating is a 55-second cooldown, so it tends to work better if you're trying to do like an all-in deathmatch. If you're just going for short, repeated trades, then Second Wind is probably going to be your better rune. In fact, it's definitely going to be your better rune. So I actually think, and this is just my opinion, I think Second Wind outperforms that. If you don't need Tenacity, you can just go with Demolish, I guess. It's not a bad rune. Is it a good rune? Unrenekton, it's not bad. Some people do it. It's not bad. So Demolish Second Wind, if you don't need Unflinching, can be quite profitable. I'll say that. Yeah, that's about it for his build here. Very powerful. No downside to this champion. Renekton has no downside. So that's just a very, very powerful build right there. Pretty much the same build other champions do, for sure. For items, you have Gore Drinker. This is his best item by far, not even close. Much like how Iceborne Gauntlet makes Kosante like a Giga Chad, Gore Drinker makes Renekton a Giga Chad. Renekton has enough base damage that he can still one-shot you with Gore Drinker, but now he can heal, he can survive through all-in attempts. That 400 HP is incredible. Remember, his ult gives him HP, which, you know, if he loses that HP, he can help heal it up with Gore Drinker as well. So, yeah. It's just, he can use it in his Qs, he can use it in his W. He he's just very powerful with it. And Gore Drinker into Rage Q is a combo he can use to try to 1v2. It's actually quite effective. It works a lot. Gore Drinker is just blatantly his best item. Now, there is a thing, you can go Stridebreaker. If you're playing the ranged champion, Stridebreaker is quite good. It allows you to obviously slow them, beat the shit out of them. Stridebreaker is not a bad item on Renekton right now. It's just not as good as Gore Drinker. But if you're fighting into a certain champion that you need to run down and you need to actually get in range and stay in range of them, Stridebreaker is going to perform a little bit better. Your second item, this might change, but for now, it's going to be Spirit Sojin. It was Black Cleaver, but now it's changing over to Spirit Sojin. If you need Armor Pen, go Black Cleaver. If you're fighting a bunch of squishies, Spirit Sojin is better. Now, do remember that Spirit Sojin is getting a nerf coming up recently, so it'll probably be equal. Right now, Spirit Sojin is default better. Black Cleaver is only better if you need lots of Armor Pen. After Spirit Sojin, it's going to lose 5 damage, I think, in a day or two. It'll be a little bit more equal, but I think Spirit Sojin still edges it out a little bit. I'm not saying Black Cleaver is bad by any stretch of imagination. I think Spirit Sojin is just really, really good right now for Renekton, and because he tends to play at low HP. Okay. Then, of course, we have everybody's best friend, Mr. Sterix Gauge. This is the item that makes Renekton just an absolutely insane team fighter. Because Renekton can generate a lot of gold by just dominating his lane and getting a lot of CS in his lane, he can tend to get to 3 item builds quicker than a lot of other champions. You can also get a lot of early game kills if he plays well. Sterix Gauge makes Renekton basically unburstable in a team fight because Sterix Gauge scales the way it does. The shield is based on your bonus HP, but Renekton's ult gives him bonus HP, so Sterix Gauge shield is absolutely massive. So the Sterix Gauge shield, the Rage Q healing, the Gore Drinker healing, it makes Renekton very, 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 very hard to kill, obviously. And this, in turn, just makes him a teamfight monster. Which means that Renekton, the early game champion, actually scales quite competently into the late game. I'm not going to say he's the best late game champion, but I'll say he's a pretty competent late game champion. Okay? So Renekton basically has no downside. I'll say it again. Renekton basically has no downside. As of right now. I think a lot of people don't really comprehend what that means. Renekton basically has no downside. He has no horrible matchups. He has no real getting like outscaled issue. He's just so good right now as a champion. Now into the S tiers. For the S tiers, I'm going to list 2 champions that I think are just ridiculously overstat right now and basically break the game, in my opinion. So the first one we have up is number 2, Fiora. Now, I'm not even sure if Fiora is the number 2 most broken champion in the game at this point. Or I should say they're not even broken. It's not like these guys are broken. They're just the strongest. The other guy's definitely broken. Fiora probably doesn't deserve to be number 2, but I'm listing her here because she has historically just completely ruined top lane for everyone. She hasn't really benefited from all the item buffs people have gotten. So, Gore Drinker, she can kind of use Gore Drinker, but she can't really use Sterix. Spirit Sojin is definitely good on her. That's an item that could be good. I think as people get more and more used to, as more and more people get used to new items, that her win rate might go up a little bit. But definitely, like, there's less synergy with the new items with Fiora, if that makes sense to you. Like, whereas Gore Drinker, Spirit Sojin, Sterix are amazing on Renekton and make obvious sense. On Fiora, like, she can go Spear, it's okay. But, you know, there's other items that are performing just as good or maybe potentially even better, right? So, yeah. The thing here, though, is Fiora is so ungodly broken and has been for such a long period of time that even as every other champion gets buffed, even as every other champion gets power creeped, Fiora doesn't. And she doesn't even need to. She's just been that broken. She has been so broken for such a long time. Like, it has been years and years of this champion being broken. Ever since season 6, she's been broken. So it's season 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's 8 years of this champion being overpowered. And every time she isn't completely dominant in the meta, she gets buffed again. Which is insane when you think about it, right? That they just keep doing that. Fortunately, they haven't been buffing her lately. They've allowed everyone else to power creep, and they have been slowly catching up to her. I do agree, other champions have slowly been catching up to Fiora's power level, but my god, what a broken piece of shit she's been, right? And even now, even as everyone else gets buffed, it's really just the fact that she's not a safe first pick, and she's a little bit one-dimensional. Those are her only downsides. Her only downsides is that she's not a safe first pick, and she can be a bit one-dimensional when you play her, because like if she wins lane, she snowballs. If she doesn't win lane, well, you know, and yeah, that's about it. I really wish Riot would delete her from the game. Not even like nerf her, just literally delete her. And not even remove her from ranked, I mean actually delete her. I mean literally delete her. Like you log in one day and Fiora doesn't exist. Riot never mentions it. You can't click the champion. She's not there. You go into the where is it? You go into champions, you try to find Fiora, and she's just not there. It acts like she just never existed. You ask a rider and they say, Fiora, what's that? Did you hit your head? I pray for days where Fiora actually just gets obliterated from the game. As her runes, what runes does she go? Boy oh boy. Okay, let's talk runes then real quick here. Runes, she's completely overpowered in every way with effectively no downside. Okay, actually she does have a lot of downsides. She's not Renekton. She actually does have quite a bit of downsides. You know what? I don't even care enough about Fiora to say this. She's gonna go Grasping and Dying or Conqueror. For items, figure them out. If you're playing Fiora, I hate you. Figure it out. I hate you. Number 1, who do I think is actually the single strongest top laner in the game right now? Overall, across all ranks, who do I think is the strongest top laner in the game? Yone. Yone is not supposed to be a top laner. Riot has completely screwed up the game's balance, and I'm not really sure what they've done. Yone, a champion who is balanced, like, let me put it this way. If Kosante had a 50% win rate, he would completely destroy the game. Yone is a 50% win rate, and he basically completely destroys the game. He is so just insanely overstat. I don't really have a better way to put it. This champion is just catastrophically overstat. I think Riot literally doesn't know. For some reason, I think they literally don't know that his shield gets doubled when he hits a champion. I don't know a better way to put it. I think they literally straight up forgot his shield gets doubled when he hits a champion. Before the durability update, his shield was 80 plus what was it? It was 80 plus 1.2 AD. After the durability update, so now it is now up to being 120 plus 1.3 AD at level 1. That's right. Let me it went from 80 to 120 after the durability update when all shields got nerfed. And it went from a 1.2 AD ratio to a 1.3. I'm going to keep this in perspective for you guys. Basically, every champion has had their shielding and healing nerfed. Yone's not only hasn't been nerfed, but has gone up by 50%. I think Riot literally forgot that Spirit Cleave doubles its shield when it hits a champion. So right now, Yone's shield is so ludicrous in the laning phase, and its cooldown is low, that he gets to beat effectively every champion in the game in a trade. There's almost no champion that can actually outtrade Yone right now. And if you know how to play him and you can keep your ADHD under control, he basically has no losing matchups anymore. The matchups where he hypothetically can lose, he actually goes about even or wins. So the only matchups right now that he just straight hard loses are seemingly Riven and Tryndamere. Those are the only two matchups he cannot win, because those are the only two matchups that just purely stat check him. Every other matchup, Jax, Renekton, all of those, he goes actually about even. He is absurdly overstat. I do not understand. If there was like a tier, he's like S++ infinity. I literally don't understand. When Cosante had a 50% win rate and he was just ramming everybody to death and stun locking them before they nerfed his stuns and stuff, that's how I feel Yone is right now. It's just like, this isn't right. There's something broken in Riot's brain. The fact that they actually think this is reasonable is crazy. There's a high tendency, and I'm going to say this, Yone players are amongst the worst players in all of League of Legends. If we compare Yone players to like Irelia players to Riven players, I think Irelia players literally can't help but throw their lead. They can't help it. Irelia players will always throw their lead. Riven players will always go for a stupid play. Now, they're not as bad as Irelia players. They won't always die from it. But Riven players will quite frequently go for stupid plays that can result in them losing their lead. Yone players are so goddamn stupid that they will always throw their lead. But the champion is so overtuned right now that the majority of the time they run up and die, the champion just goes, oh no, I can't die. They run into someone and do the worst play you've ever seen in their life, and then it works out because the champion is that overstat. They triple gap close next to a Renekton, miss every single ability, end up next to him with nothing available without even stacking lethal tempo, then just purely stat check him to death. They play against a Jax and don't even outplay his Counter-Strike, then just Q knock up into R knock up into he's dead from full. Like, the champion is S infinity tier. I don't understand what's happening with Riot's balance at this point. And if you actually learn how to play Yone, and you can keep your ADHD under check, and you can keep yourself from throwing the game, the other thing is, unlike other champions like Irelia, that can throw their lead, even Riven can kind of throw her lead, right? Yone scales so absurdly well right now with his new builds. Like, he scales so good that there's basically no way to throw your lead. If you make the worst decisions of your entire life, you still can't throw your lead because you scale so well. It's stupid. So, I think this tier list, or at the very least, this top 10 top laners list, I think this will be accurate for about a month and a half. I'll even say maybe 2 months. Some champions might go in and out of this list. I do want to put one addendum here. Unless he gets nerfed pretty hard. There we go. Tryndamere is getting nerfed recently. So we'll see where he is after the nerf. If he doesn't end up getting nerfed that hard, I think Tryndamere is also Giga S tier. Probably stronger than Yone, in fact. I'm excluding him for now begrudgingly because he is getting nerfed and I want to see where that lands. But I highly suspect even after that nerf, he's still going to be Giga S tier. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. But I'm not including him in the 10. He's going to be like the wild card super S. That's just because Riot buffed him really stupidly and they colossally over buffed him and now he's just completely dominant. But I think I think it would be like a bit unfair. Like if I want this to stand the test of time, so to speak, I think putting Trinimir up here is a little bit disingenuous because we don't know where he's gonna land. I highly doubt the nerfs are gonna be enough. So, with that said, I think that would be a fair tier listing right now. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say. So, 10 Darius, 9 Malphite, 8 Riven, 7 Camille, 6 Aatrox, 5 Jax, 4 Cosante, 3 Renekton, 2 Fiora, 1 Yone, and then wildcard Trinimir is probably the overall best top laner in the game right now. But again, he's getting nerfed like in tomorrow, and I don't know where he's going to land after that. I highly suspect, though, he's still going to be the best. But this is kind of... Riot does this pretty often. You've probably noticed this, where they giga buff a champion, and then they just like, they slowly nerf them until they stop being even viable. So this is kind of probably going to be like a blip on the radar. They'll probably nerf him next patch, then they'll nerf him the patch after that, and then he'll stop being viable. Hopefully, he stops being viable. I don't like fighting Tryndamere. He's really lame. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, leave me your thoughts on all of this. Thank you, everybody. And if you got this far in the video, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone.